Well, welcome to another episode of the Residential Developer Podcast. I'm the host. My name's Nathan Battishall, and I want to do an episode today, and I understand this episode may not be relevant now to everyone, but I've had a lot of people asking me to talk into this space. I want to do an episode where talking about higher end, smaller projects, higher spec'd up projects, and I think it's a really exciting space to get into. And I think, look, for a lot of people, and me personally, I don't like to delve into the low sort of the project spec market, and you'll hear me talk about that. And look, there's a space for it. I just found it too competitive, but at the same time, it's very hard to push straight into that sort of higher end or higher spec'd up market. But it's quite a fun space to be in if you can get into that space. Obviously, I've spent a lot of years in and around that space. Not on all of our projects. We do a lot of mid-spec and then, push into the higher spec type projects. But the higher spec projects are an exciting place to be in because for me, I think it's where you can make some really good money if you're smart and you're wise. And look, the same principles apply. You've obviously got to be smart with your numbers. You've got to run your feasibilities. But I think the principles go across every single sphere of investment and development. Now, you have the ability to lose bigger sums of money when you're dealing in the high spec'd up areas, especially areas on the waterfront, really high-end suburbs, high-end areas. You start to really run into some high levels of risk or higher levels of risk. But also you can run into some higher levels of reward as well. So for me, so many principles of executing and developing and becoming world-class when it comes to it being an investor or a developer or something passionate about doing projects, the principles will carry you through all different phases and stages of your journey. Yes, you've got to morph and change, and there's slightly different tweaks you need to adapt. But when it comes to really running your numbers, running your feasibilities, checking your constraints, developing a world-class team, a lot of the fundamental things are very similar. You want to make sure by the time you're doing some higher spec projects that you've become a little bit more seasoned. I always get concerned when I see someone jumping straight into a high-end project straight off the bat. Now I get it. I've had this. We've had clients who just are cashed up to the hilt. They're not exposed in any way. They've got the ability to take a hit if they need to. But generally, I find most people that are fairly cashed up and they've developed a fair bit of wealth, there's a reason why, is because they're smart, they're wise, they carry a lot of wisdom when they handle resources, especially money, which has got them to that place. But look, let's face it, I've seen people that play with other people's money that can be quite careless when it comes to projects because it's not essentially their own hard-earned cash, and they can be a little bit careless when it comes to handling projects and sites with care and diligence. So for me, just make sure that if you are new in the space, just cut your teeth on something that's manageable, cut your teeth on something that's lower risk. But look, if you've got a vision to do high-end projects, like for me personally, it's a dream of mine is to get to the point where I can do, 5+ just really high-end projects per year. I'm not there yet, but that's a dream of mine in the future. It's roughly about a 10-year dream. Like from the age of 50 to 60, I want to do 5 high-end projects per year. And so for me, it's looking at, okay, what does the next period of my life, the next decade look like to get to that place so that I can do that? Because for me, it's not a job, it's a passion. It's something I love, but it's a space where you can also do quite well if you're smart and you're wise and you're able to find the right sites, execute the right sites, and make sure everything stacks up. So for me, that high-end space is obviously enjoyable because obviously, and you'll hear me talk a lot about this on the podcast, is when you are doing developments and projects, you do need to strip the emotion out of a lot of your decision making. When it's firstly looking for a site, when it's looking at the finishes, the build, all that sort of thing. But the amazing thing when you start to move into that higher end space, it's where you can bring a lot of emotion back in to doing a development. And when I say that, obviously you've still got to think smartly. You've still got to look at the bottom end, obviously. You're doing this to generate wealth. Anyone doing it, you're doing it to generate wealth. You're doing it to get ahead. So you've still got to think with your head and not so much with your heart. But the beauty of doing higher end projects is you can start to bring out a lot more feel. You can put a lot more of your heart. You can put a lot more of your energy and your time and your emotion into those sort of projects. And I know for myself, like, that's why I want to get to that point where I can do that, because having a wife who's an interior designer, for her, she loves working on the higher spec'd up projects because she can put so much of her heart. She can help capture the heart of her clients and our clients when it comes to executing those projects, and you're not as constrained or limited by finishes and fixtures and really being able to bring that project to life and make it not just feel like a home, but just feel like someone's walking into a holiday or they're walking into, just a sense of calm and relaxation or whatever feel you're wanting to create. So for me, that's the beauty of when you start to get into that space. You can actually put a lot more of emotion into the development, because you can really, once you start to get up into that upper echelon of property, you've got generally a more unique buyer. You've got a buyer that's generally lived in some really nice properties, or they've experienced holidays in really nice places, or they've got particular tastes. And a lot of these type of client, once you start getting into the properties where you're selling them for sort of, $2.5, $3.5, $4.5, $5.5 million duplexes, for example, or townhouses or standalone houses, once you start to get into that echelon, a lot of this buyer, they spot the fake, they spot the cheap product, they spot, the mid-spec or the lower spec, they spot the poor construction quality, they spot the defects, they spot, the lack of, design that's gone into and flow and that's gone into the design. And that's where you can spend more time with your design team, your designers, your interior, your architectural building design. You can spend more time really just nailing down your colours, your fixtures, your fittings, your finishes. You can spend more time, adding some more detail to certain features, whether it be stairs, whether it be the indoor-outdoor flow, whether it be, certain features on the facade, whether it be, types of glazing or, rake ceilings and creating, curves and all different sorts of things that, yes, you may need to be careful in lower and mid-spec projects, but you can start to really give yourself more leeway, more buffer, understanding that the echelon, the buyer that you're attracting and you're bringing in, you want them to connect with that product as soon as they walk into it. That's where it can be quite an exciting space to be in, because as a developer, some developers still want to be hands off, but I find a lot of guys that get to that place, for my wife and I, we've always loved doing things together. And so the dream is to be able to do some really high-end projects in the future together where we can actually envision it and dream it. Me with my building design background and planning background, my wife with her interior background, and then development background between us, and being able to really combine that together and just, be a next phase in our relationship, in our dreams and our goals together, to be able to create products that people love and to be able to create spaces that people get excited about and people walk into and just feel like they're walking into a dream or into a holiday. And I know a lot of people that want to delve in that space, and I've got a lot of clients who've got the ability to move in that space and do one project a year or one every couple of years, and and be able to really just invest into that project. And that is the one great thing about that space, is that you can invest a lot more into it. It's not, yes, it's a money decision, but it's also got to have a big, strong sense of feel, and personality and design and collaboration between your team to have those spaces that just work. They flow, they function, they fit. It just all combines and works together to create an incredible outcome. And as I said, the principles align from all through different types of projects, but this is an exciting space. And like I said, if you're listening today and you're not at that place, there's nothing wrong with that, nor do you have to be in that space. But I do get a lot of people that come to us that want to move into that space. They want to get to that space. For some people, to get to that space, they JV first up. For some people, they invest in to different firms. There's different firms out there that you can partner up with, and whether you agree with them or not, that is a way that some people can get into that space. You generally get a lot less opportunity to invest in, but I know for a lot of people, it's the ability to put your heart and soul into a project and be able to say, hey, we're able to contribute to that. And I think these type of developments are suitable. And you've still got to have wisdom. You've still got to trust your team. You've still got to make sure that you're thinking with your head and your heart. Your head's obviously, I always say, your head's got to be the leader. Your heart's got to be the follower. You don't want to lead with your heart. You want your head to be the leader, because that's where you make good decisions, wise decisions, but you got to trust your heart too and go off your gut, go off your heart, go off the feeling as well. Just make sure it always aligns though with the numbers. Make sure it aligns with the direction. Make sure you still de-risk the project like you would any project. Make sure that you run your numbers. Make sure you're conservative. Make sure you work off worst case resales. Don't work off a number that's never been hit, never been reached. Make sure that you're getting comparables. It can be tricky in this space to get comparables, because often you could be creating a product that's never been seen or has rarely been seen, or a product where there's not enough research or not enough data to be able to show you. And I've seen some people doing these projects and they'll run off really far-fetched or high numbers, and it needs to work based on that number that's quite unknown. Now, if you want to run that way, that's fine. Some people have the ability, the means, the capital. As I said, some people aren't using their own money, so they don't care. But then there's other people who they've generated wealth and they've got that risk-taking ability, and that's fine too. But as I said, a lot of people that have generated wealth, they've got there for a reason, due to wisdom around money. So they do want to run smart numbers. So you still want to run your numbers smart. But one exciting thing about pushing into the high-end development space is that you can, obviously you need to input more capital. You need to have more capital behind you to obviously execute. And generally, if you don't have a lot of capital behind you, you're generally paying a lot of interest too, which obviously can chew into your margins and can bring on quite a bit of pressure too if time frames do blow out. But you'll also find that the build time frames, you've got to be very strong on those too, because you can't be going off. And I've seen this. I've seen where guys pushing into that higher spec'd up space in really beautiful coastal water view, beautiful suburbs, top reselling areas, and they're trying to work off, really tight, 6-month time frames for builds and things like that. And look, everything may align and you may hit it, but if you want to do a high-end product, if you want to build a high-end product, you need to allow the time. You want to work with a builder who's not going to rush through it. Yes, you don't want them dragging the chain for 18 months or 2 years or 3 years, but you need to allow longer time frames as well, because I see this where people, they don't allow the time frames and all of a sudden they're vetting through builders and churning through builders in that sort of quoting or tendering process, and they end up going with a builder they may be able to get it done quicker, but just doesn't have the competency and the ability to create a high-end product. And all of a sudden, yes, they might have saved 6 months on the build, but then all of a sudden you might have a product that might sell for $500,000 less, or $400K less, or $300K less per site or each product, purely because it's just far inferior the way it's been built, constructed. You got to remember too that builders have a reputation too in areas. Believe it or not, like there's certain builders, if you use that builder, they can be quite reputable, and just using that builder alone will sell a product, will sell a project. Yes, sometimes you pay more for it, but just that alone can sometimes add to the reputation that certain builders are able to develop through doing products and being known for building product that is higher spec, higher end, that is reputable, that is, classed as elite in that space. And they're important decisions to make. Not every site will be justifiable in going with that type of builder, but there are particular sites that you do not give that site justice unless you use the elite of the elite when it comes to that type of project. But look, 90% of the time it's securing a builder that's right on top of the construction, that's right on top of the product, that's right on top of the project, that is invested in, especially ideally, I always say, like, if you can select your builder early on, and I think that goes across any type of product, mid-spec, high-spec, project spec. I think having your builder identified early on, and that's where it's about being honest with the builder and really determining this is your build budget. Determine what your build budget is, and you want to determine that when you buy your site, when you source and secure your site, because a lot of people, they buy the site, then they haven't run their numbers, so they're trying to build a product that can't be built for that price. And the reality was they should never have bought that site. That goes across mid-spec, project spec, high-end product. Like, you've bought the wrong site, you've paid the wrong price for it, and the reality is you should never have bought it. You should have had realistic numbers from the start. So by doing that early on, you're able to really work with the builder to determine what product you can fit, what product you can build, and then what that product needs to be to fetch the return and the resale. And a lot of it comes down to your numbers. And again, I always say this, like when you're securing a high-end site, you want to be making sure, ideally you want to be securing a site off-market if you can, or at a place where you can really be firm and strong and know your numbers. And the beauty is you often can secure those type of sites off-market because there's a limit. You don't have the competition that you might have, for example, for more of a mid-spec type site. So less competition, meaning that you can negotiate and find and source those sites. There's people all over Australia that can help you in that space, different buyers agents, consultants, real estate agents with good access to off-market sites. But it's just the ability to be able to really just dig down and discover and unearth and unlock a site that has incredible potential. So, you also want to be factoring in design elements when you start to get into that space, because you want to be making sure, everything is aligning well. Like I've seen it where someone's bought a south-facing site where all the views are to the south, and sometimes not even views, but then they want to design this high-end product and get premium for it, and it's facing south. You got no benefit. It's cold. All your living areas are flowing to the south where it's cold, freezing cold in winter, no sunlight. It just makes the house, not livable. And you got to remember, when people are spending big money, 2.5, 3, 4, 4.5, 5 million plus for a duplex or or a product that you've developed, you've got to remember these people, generally, the buyer has lived in a number of houses over the course of their life. They've often either built houses, they've bought houses. They know what they want, they know what they don't want. And you got to remember when they're going into the open homes, when they're walking through the inspections, when they're looking at a property to either downsize to or to relocate to, you got to remember these people are seasoned in life. When they're spending that sort of money, generally they're seasoned in life. They're generally seasoned in what is good and what's not good. They're seasoned in the conditions. They're seasoned in, solar passive design. They're seasoned in finishes. They're seasoned in materials. They're seasoned in what the difference between good construction and poor construction. They're seasoned in little finishes and touches and little design elements and well thought out creative ideas that have been executed by your design team and your builder and your interior designers and your consultants. And they're very well seasoned in picking up the fake. They're very well seasoned in discovering and picking up the touches that make this desirable. And that's where you can't leave a stone unturned once you start to delve into that space, especially if you're wanting to sell products at $3 million plus. You've got to be really on top of the trends. You've got to be working with people that are on top of the trends. You've got to be, invested into the type of product you want to create. You want to make sure that you've developed a strong brief, that you've done your research, that you've carried out that research to be able to execute that project. But the beauty is when you do this well, there is the ability to generate incredible profit. There's the ability to generate incredible wealth in through doing these type of projects. So they're not only quite satisfying. I find a lot of people that delve into this space find this type of development very satisfying. Yes, I know people that find it very stressful too, but I think a lot of it can be stressful because of poor decision making. And I find a lot of the guys that do move into this space have become seasoned. They've got backing. They've developed a smart plan, and they're able to really just pivot into this space. And they know their numbers. They're smart with how they do things. They've developed a world-class team around them, and it's quite an enjoyable space and camaraderie that they build with the team around them too as they delve into this space. But you look at it like I've had clients that have made upwards of $1.5 million just on a duplex in the right location, the right spot. Where they might have been able to keep one side and just straight away put $1 million plus of equity into one project, 1.5 into one project. I've seen it where, just doing 3 standalones, in a beautiful area right near the beach with some water views, in beautiful coastal locations where they can put 1.5 million, of MDC into a project just purely in one project by executing one project. And, I've seen clients where they've got multiple of these projects on the go at a time. Some move from project to project, but it's an enjoyable space. It's a fun space, and it's a space where if you do love a little bit of hands-on, where you can actually throw a bit of your own feel and flavour into it and, really go on that journey of excitement and enjoying it. And I've seen that now, that there's guys who see this as sort of like semi-retirement type project, or they've maybe own a business that a lot of it can run without them, and they've got some capital and they really have a passion for doing property, and they can just enjoyable when you see them in their zone of genius and just really throwing themselves in and, really doing something quite meaningful and worthwhile, and they get the satisfaction of pulling the trigger on a wonderful project, but they get the end result too of not only seeing that product finished, be able to walk through it and realise they created something special and unique and something that, someone else will be able to live out their dreams in that property, but they also end up with quite a healthy return and capital so that they can do it again, so they can enjoy adventures in life, so they can live quality of life, so they can do all the things they want to do with the capital that they've been able to generate, as well as have that happy feeling of being able to create something. And I think there's something to be said about us as humans, that we were born to create. Most of us, when we're not creating, it's not healthy. We should be creating something. It doesn't have to be property, but for most of you listening to these episodes, you've got a passion to create property. And when we're creating property, it's an exciting feeling when you get to walk through that end product, when you get to see, a blank canvas and get to see a finished product and see it executed, especially when it's executed at a high level, and be able to walk through that and just see that end product. So look, I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Definitely this year, I plan on doing a lot more and talking a lot more into this space, because I think it is an area where there is still great opportunities. Again, it's not for everyone. We will be spending some more time in that space, because I do get a lot of people asking, can you do some episodes and talk on high-end products and high-end projects? And I definitely plan to bring some guests in talking about some high-end projects and different consultants and team and high-end builders and different people to speak into that space as well. So look, I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Again, feel free to like, share, subscribe, and we'll see you next week.